Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spoiler Warning Podcast. This is review number 720 with a review of Decision to Leave. I'm Christopher Schnese.
And I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning Podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week in the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest films coming to a theater near you. This week, we snuck out to see a little film called Decision to Leave. Now, Stephen, I know you've probably seen, like me, this trailer like 1,000 times at Alamo before everything else that we've been seeing for the last several weeks. And, you know, the little titles that come up during the trailer are like the most romantic movie you will ever see all year. You know, I know this we're in the age of hot serial killers, and like everybody wants to fuck everyone who's like done horrible things in every single Netflix show and whatever. But like the basic premise of this film is creepy as hell, right?
Very much, yeah. Yeah, and I don't know why. We'll get into it, but I don't know who is billing it as romantic. I think it's seductive. I think like if there are words to describe what this movie is like dripping with, but romance isn't one. And also, as long as we're here and can just talk about, you know, audiences and the way things are portrayed. I don't know about your crowd, but my entire audience seemed to think this was like a laugh-a-minute comedy the whole way through in a way that really irritated me.
So I definitely chuckled a good amount. Like I think, I mean, you know, it opens with the director saying like, this movie will make you cry but also laugh, right? Like it is. There are moments that are for sure played for laughs, like specifically the main investigator's partner guy. Like, you know, like there are moments where it's like, you know, it's not laugh a minute, but it's
no,
it's
like I would give you like chuckle every 5 minutes. Like I believe it's that kind of movie. There's just my audience was roaring like the whole time.
Yeah.
And I felt weird about it.
Yeah, I don't think my audience was roaring the whole time, but there was definitely a good amount of laughs. I chuckled out loud a few times, but yeah, and part of it might be a little bit of uncomfortableness with what is being presented to them. But yeah, it's definitely a mix of you know, sexual tension, comedy, intrigue. You know, there's the whole gamut.
See, like, I experienced this with Triangle of Sadness, too, and my theory, at least, was that San Francisco audiences, whenever there's a foreign language film that is supposed to have any humor in it, anytime they recognize something that even conceivably could be funny, they, like, make an effort to laugh, to be like, ha, I get it, I connect with you, in a way that I just find, like, insufferable.
Yeah. That makes sense. I feel you there.
But maybe I'm a curmudgeon and people are just enjoying it, and I'm just like an asshole sitting in the back like, why are you laughing? This is seductive.
I'm trying to watch this Stevie movie and everybody's laughing and killing my mood.
I'm trying to get turned on by this movie about murder, and you're all fucking it up.
All right. Should we get into it, Steven?
Let's do it.
All right, we're going to take a listen to the trailer, even though the trailer is not in English, for Decision to Leave, and then we're going to come back and give everyone a review.
정상에서 떨어지셨다고 봐야지. 저기. 여기.
기러수 씨 아내 송설아입니다.
많이 놀라셨겠습니다.
웃는 거 봤어?
젊고 예쁘고 외국인이어서 피의자가 돼야 되냐? 알리바이 입증된 거야.
예쁜 거 인정하시는 거네요.
그 친절한 형사의 심장을 가져다 주세요. 난 좀 갖고 싶네.
저 거기 없는데요.
그럼 어딘데요?
졸지 말아요. 조금만 더 참아요. 우리 일을 그렇게 말하지 말아요.
우리 일 무슨 일이요? 당신을 끌어안고 행복하다고 속삭인 일이요? 내가 그렇게 만만합니까?
내가 그렇게 나쁩니까?
살인은 흡연과 같아서 처음만 어렵다.
All right, that was the trailer for Decision to Leave. It's basically about an investigator who is investigating a man's death and, has to begin investigating potentially the wife who he suspects of being maybe in on the murder. Stephen Miller, what did you think of Decision to Leave?
I like Decision to Leave quite a bit, even though it kind of zagged rather than zigged in terms of Park Chan-wook's career. This is a movie that seems like it is going to explode, because of what you know about the filmmaker and his general kind of maximalist style and everything. And this movie honestly just kind of does a slow boil and lets you enjoy that for the whole time. This is a movie that I think I kept saying the word seductive. I think this is kind of a classic noir movie, right? In that there is a detective character, there is a woman who may be guilty, may be innocent, but either way, she's in the room with him now, and he finds himself getting more and more obsessed with her, and the lines start to blur between good and evil, and he gets just captivated, right? And I think this movie, it is really good at keeping you in that captivated headspace where he barely sleeps. He's obsessed with the case. He has this kind of strange weekend marriage with his wife in Ipoh, but he spends all of his time in Busan. And you just see the way when this woman enters his life, and I am avoiding saying the character name only because despite watching the whole movie, I do not know how you are meant to pronounce her character name, because the way it is spelled does not sound like what anyone in the movie said. I'm just going to say Seore, even though it is not correct. When he sees her, she is like a gravitational force for him, where there's just something about her that he connects to on a deep level. He wants to solve her. He wants to understand her. And this movie is kind of about the way that when you fall for someone or get obsessed with them, that obsession can blot out the sun. You cannot see what is sitting right in front of you. And I just think when the movie is just living in that space of them having this little back and forth, he is investigating her, but she is also having a relationship of some sort with him. They are connecting even while he suspects her of being a killer. I think this movie is just great when it lives in this space. When it becomes more plotty in kind of the third act, it doesn't lose me, but I just care so little about the plot compared to the feeling and the vibe that the movie is. I didn't make that much of an effort to follow who is Slappy and why does Slappy connect to so-and-so, right? Like all those things, they were color for a movie that was all vibes for me. And as a vibe, I really, really liked this movie. But it didn't necessarily add up to a incredible story on top of it. When I talk about vibes, I think even just listening to the soundtrack or the trailer, the soundtrack is so cool in this movie. I was just listening to it and just kind of bopping in my seat and just feeling that kind of that gravitational force of Park Chan-wook's filmmaking and how effortlessly you can just spend 2 hours watching this interesting, kind of violent, kind of romantic, kind of mysterious thing unwind. So yeah, I liked it a lot, but I think it is very much a mood piece, not so much a grand epic story.
Yeah, I think this film is kind of two movies. You're watching the first film and its sequel, all wrapped into one thing. And this film could end halfway through, and it would be a full, complete, contained story arc. But the story this does want to tell is is more epic and grand. I think there's a lot of meandering that happens in between to sort of justify it. I mean, the problem is, like, if you get into a situation where somebody potentially killed their husband, like, if they find themselves anywhere close to anything shady in the future, you have to do a lot of heavy lifting to not just immediately like find that person guilty of something, right? So it's like this film wants to play with the idea of this guy who is, I'm not going to call him like a Sherlock Holmes type, but he's clearly supposed to be like the hotshot inspector in his group, and he like solves all the cases and other than the wall of unsolved cases that he has, I guess. But like it's very much about a person who's, it's not clear whether he has insomnia and that makes him better at his job, or if he has insomnia because he's better at his job. But there's some aspect to this person really diving in and getting involved in a case that is, it's super fun and entertaining. There are definitely parts later on when I'm trying to follow like the chain of events that involves Slappy and trying to understand like what web are you trying to string. And it's not that the film is trying to be tricky. It's just trying to dot all the I's and cross all the T's to make sure that the obvious answer is not just like, oh, well, this is the only outcome for this moment. And then it really becomes kind of a fairy tale. Like I think that if you watch this film, like Jamie and I were driving home afterwards, and she was asking about like this little section in the, this 3/4 through the film. And I was like, honestly, I think it's okay if you didn't follow all of that, because what's really important is the middle and the end. Those two like bookends, the to be continued in the middle, and then the bookend of this film. It is sort of this fairy tale about this romance between these two people and what they both meant to each other and how their presence affected the other person in the chronological aspect of when they met each other and what they meant for each other in real time. And I think that it is kind of a, interesting, beautiful tale, and the decisions that characters make for how they will try to present themselves to the other person, the longing that they have from afar in all these moments, as creepy as it might be, is still played very romantically and playfully. And like the moments of the way this film handles the version of like I love my dad type of thing, where it's two characters who are not in the same room being in the same room for the purposes of the filmic language. Like I really, really love that playfulness of what this film is doing.
My favorite stylistic flourish in the movie is how seamlessly it does that, where like characters are suddenly transported in space, to be next to each other when they are talking to each other or spying on each other or thinking about each other. I think it does it really well.
I really love too, like the added of it, where it's not just that they are in the same space together. They are in the same space apart, yet both aware of the other person's presence. Like little subtle nods to how they both understand that the other person is near, even though they are alone, even though we are watching them together. And like there's a very, very creative way to do that storytelling, and really just kind of heighten the enjoyment of the film. I think all along I was definitely sucked in and enjoying my journey through the film, even in that little 3/4 through confusing like chain of events that has to get put in place to make everything work out for the way the story wants to go. But
I'm glad I'm not alone, because I kind of thought I was going to come on here and you were going to be like, Stephen, this is what happened, and like you were just going to lay out everything.
let me show you my murder wall.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, like I kind of get the chain of events. I just don't get the there's a scene where a person is on a phone and says, "If this happens, I will do X," and I was like, okay, I get the chain from there forward. I don't get why he said, "If this happens, I will do X." Like, you know what I mean? Like there was something I missed somewhere along the way, and I just kind of like, okay, whatever. I go for it. I don't care. But yeah, I think. The fairy tale of it really, really worked for me, and just sort of that the feeling of what it means at the end. I was kind of like, all right, I like it. I'm there for it. This works for me.
Yeah, and I think even in that regard, I like thinking of it as a fairy tale. I think that is like an interesting way to read the ending, because it does have that kind of more mystical quality to it. It almost, it's a weird comparison because it's to a movie I don't think either of us particularly liked, but it almost makes me think of like that movie Undina that we talked about from New York Film Festival, where it's like a fantastical thing about a love that can't be, or the woman that like vanishes, and that is a very noir-y thing, right? Like a lot of the beats of the movie, including the fact that there are two parts and she shows up later kind of under a different, all of that, it kind of feels very classic twisty detective. Do I love you? Do I hate you? Are you good? Are you evil? But the movie just handles it really well, and I do think, I know it is kind of the easy critical thing to say anything is a meta commentary on the director's work, right? You can just say that and drop a mic and walk away no matter what movie you're talking about, and they'll be like, oh yeah, of course. But here it kind of feels like it, because this is a movie that is about someone who is surrounded by violence all the time and gets kind of obsessive over it. And he is suddenly pulled towards this person and away from what used to give him joy and pleasure. And I think the fact that the twisty, ultra-violent criminals and motives and everything stuff kind of just fizzles to give way to a fairy tale love story of sorts it's interesting to think of what kind of reflection Park Chan-wook is making there, in terms of like, why did he decide to make this movie and not the violent, intense spectacle that a version of this movie could be if he wanted it to be, right? Like what is it about connection or whatever that he's thinking about? I don't have an answer to it, but
it doesn't completely avoid the violence though, because there's definitely a scene where somebody gets stabbed like 15 times.
Sure. Yeah.
And here's the question.
For him, though, it feels pretty tame to me.
Yeah. In that scene where that person gets stabbed 15 times, was that one of the times that people in your audience laughed?
I think so, yeah.
Because it's definitely on that borderline where it's so sudden and so shocking that you're like, what the fuck?
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, good times.
Yeah.
I think, speaking of the violence and bad things in it, I think that part of the reason why I choose to watch this as a fairy tale is because that helps me accept some of the really messed up nature of decisions characters make. Just because, like, the decision to leave is pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, the goal of it is without saying it, is really just kind of, it's dark. It's dark as hell. And it's still a romantic gesture, but it is also like kind of messed up. But
it is, yeah.
If I think about it in the fairy tale context, I go like, oh yeah, beautiful, love it.
Right.
And if I think about the reality of them, like, that is messed
uncomfortable.
Up.
It's very unpleasant.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree, but it's that kind of that dark sweetness that I think he does really well.
Yeah. I think it probably you talked earlier about people watching a foreign language film and feeling more like I want to laugh at the things that I think are supposed to be funny. There might be a little bit of like, I can accept this premise as a foreign language film, where if this was an American remake of this,
you might be like nitpicking the exact way the character experiences it or something.
Well, not even that, but I mean, it might be just a more difficult pill to swallow when it's not being translated to me, in a sense. Like, it might just be like, it's only dark. There's no beauty. There's no romanticness to this. It's just fucked up.
I also have to say that the relationship parts that I did definitely laugh at in this movie are largely centered around the main character, Hae-jun, the detective, and his wife, who have this kind of I don't even know how to describe their relationship. It is very much like check the checkbox and put it in the planner or whatever of their life. And Talk about some of the least romantic sex scenes I've seen in a while in a movie.
It involves mold, right?
Yeah.
So the face she's making right before he turns his head and starts staring at the wall. Was she into it then?
I don't know.
The face she's making, I can't tell what she's like. Everything about that scene was super awkward.
Yep.
Good times.
Good times.
Well, I think we're probably about at the end of the conversations here. Stephen Miller, should we get to verdicts?
Sure.
All right. If you're going to give us a must see, recommend with a caveat, wait for rental, pass with a caveat, or a must avoid, what would you give it?
I'm giving it a recommend with a caveat. I think this movie is ultra stylish, super well acted. It is a great kind of mood piece about longing and desire, and the way two lonely people kind of find each other and latch onto each other, and what they would sacrifice for each other, and whether it is beautiful or disturbing that they would do that. Caveat being, I don't think this adds up to something quite as grand as the reviews are making it sound like. Like, I preferred The Handmaiden, for instance. I think this is just by design a much smaller movie that is living between tones in a way that is super entertaining, and definitely poked my brain for a few hours, but it didn't sit with me the same way that some movies can stick with me.
Yeah, not enough marionette fucking.
Yeah,
for my taste. But yeah, this is a recommend with a caveat from me as well. I really enjoyed my time with this film. I do have to take it as a fairy tale to accept some of the things that are happening. But it was a fun ride, and the twists and turns towards the end get a little too twist and turny without necessarily adding to what you're getting as a whole. But for me, it's kind of like that middle section, that end section. It collectively, from a bird's eye view, equals like a really great sentiment and a very enjoyable watch. So yeah, had a good time. Also gave me a little bit of come on vibes with all of the recordings.
Yeah.
And also, you and I got Apple Watches. There's no way the mics are that good.
Right.
They must have some future model that's not out yet.
Also, speaking of Apple, I don't know if I believe the step counter is quite that consistent.
I mean, it was a third party.
Right.
It was a third party app. Yeah, that's going to do it for our review of Decision to Leave. Stephen Miller, if people want to find you throughout the week, where can they do that?
People can find me at twitter.com/sdavidmiller, sdavidmiller.com.
People can find me at ChristopherMillerLife.com or Twitter.com/ChristopherIRL. You can find the podcast over at thespoilerwarning.com, where you can get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so in Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know when the episodes go live, you can follow us at Twitter.com/spoilerwarning, Facebook.com/thespoilerwarning, or Instagram.com/thespoilerwarning. If you want to get a hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will come from a track selected from artlist.io, so hopefully you are enjoying that. And yeah, we are going to take off. We have one more review to do, which we may record at a different time. We'll find out. But yeah, we'll be back later with a review of After Sun. Bye.